Good evening, everyone. Back again for episode 4 of Question Time Live. I'm glad to have Steve back with me this week as well to keep everything in order. It was a bit chaotic last week, but yeah, good to have him back. I'm literally on, I think, day 7 or day 8 of COVID lockdown. Just got out, just got negative late on today. So, yeah, that's been a giant pain. Mega busy week at Koi Wholesale as well. Got a huge shipment due to come in on Friday. I think it's 161 boxes, about 13,500 koi. And yeah, we've had a tremendous amount going out from all the customers who've been overwintering with us as well. So yeah, not a great time to be off, but managed to do it. The team up on site's done a fantastic job. So thanks to them as always for the hard work. And yeah, it's getting interesting. So while I've been locked at home, I've had the Dainichi auction to keep me entertained. You'll all be familiar with this one, but I pretty much made it clear that I weren't buying any more this year. I was going to give it a bit of a break. And yeah, the last auction a few weeks back sort of smacked that on an head, and 30 or so fish later, I was back in it. And yeah, put it out there again. Absolutely no more. We'll call it a day. And the latest auction just gone has got me even deeper into that one. So yeah, absolutely no self control. It's shocking, but yeah, some cracking fish. It was a tremendously competitive auction. Dainichi had upped their game, and yeah, we've got a few now on the screen. Ginrin Shore and Kohaku were incredibly hard to buy. Managed to get a few really top Ginrin pieces. I was actually fighting for one, which was a tremendous fish, and that's actually ended up Narita being the winning bidder on that one. And yeah, given how the price was escalating, I must have known it'd be someone like him who was never going to back down. But yeah, super happy with what I've got here. It's building to be a collection to surpass last year's even. Really excited to get hold of these. And yeah, with all the knowledge and hindsight of this past year's gone, yeah, getting into these ones and seeing what we can do with them. So yeah, enough of those. Enjoy them. And I'm sure you'll be hearing plenty more from me about the Dainichi fish as we move through those video series. So yeah, enough for me waffling. We're going to get our first guest on and see what questions we've got and where the conversation heads this week. So Steve, do you want to bring, I think we've got Jordan Mitchell first of all. Evening, Jordan.
Hi, Ricky. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. So what have you got for me? Nice fish tank, by the way.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to talk about oxygen levels in a koi pond.
Yeah.
So can you have too much oxygen going into a pond? And does ultimately this cause issues like swim bladder problems or gas bubble issues on the fins of the fish?
Yeah. Easy answer. Yes, you can. And yes, it will cause trouble if you get to that point. The likelihood of many people actually getting to that point, however, is very slim. Right. It's something I've not seen a lot over years. You know, very new ponds, you know, when you fill up with sort of fresh water and there's no organic hindrance, there's no other matter in the system, there's been no fish, no bacteria consuming oxygen. That's the point where you can often see when you've just filled up, you get a lot of tiny little gas bubbles kicking about. But very quickly that sort of dissipates and yeah, you're back to sort of usual levels. So I've very rarely seen that happen over all the time I've been doing this. So yes, you can, but the likelihood of it very slim, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Water testing. So there's a lot of test kits on the market now than what there were when I first started in the koi hobby, really.
Yeah.
Basically, there's obviously the liquid test kits, the new digital readers like the Hannah checkers.
Yeah.
Which one would you say would be more accurate? You see, I like to use liquid test kits.
Yeah. For what reason?
I just think, well, I just like looking at the chart, to be honest with you. A bit of scientific experimenting going on.
I'm glad you've sort of asked this, and this is probably going to go on a bit more of a tangent here. But for me, just the simple liquid test kits, you need to make sure you get a good one because some of them can give dicky readings. I've known that over the years. Yeah, sorry, Steve. We'll get to some of them questions in a little bit if you jog me on. Yeah, so make sure you get a good one. I use the Colombo test kit at the minute brand. I've quite like NT Labs from the past as well. But I tend to use Colombo these days. For me, I'm not into all this digital testing and all the rest of it for two reasons. One, not got time. You know, from our side of it, we're talking 60 ponds, testing all that lot with digital meters. It's going to be just so much work. I can't even begin to imagine. And for what I would consider to be a pretty pointless exercise, to be honest. Because what you get for me, obviously, it's about simplicity and it's about finding the method that is the sort of mass market method that's easy and accessible for everybody. Now, digital meters typically are a lot more expensive, so they're not as accessible for everybody. And when, in my opinion, ultimately all you need to see is that on a liquid test kit, for example, you've got ammonia and you've got nitrite shown at 0. So if that's as good as damn it to 0, you don't need something digital telling you there's 0.02 milligram per litre of nitrite in your water.
Yeah.
That them kind of levels that'll read will show us 0 on a liquid test kit. And that's all you need to know. The unfortunate thing I've seen, and I've seen this so many times in the past with digital meters. I actually remember dealing with a client when I was working the shop. And yeah, he kept talking to me about this ammonia reading he was having, and absolutely constantly. And it wasn't until a lot further down the conversation I got out that he was using a digital meter. This is what actually is this ammonia reading, and it was a 0.0 whatever it was at the time. I said, so basically then it's 0 because you're never going to get complete 0 ammonia in a pond that's got fish in that's being fed. It's an impossibility. So I tend to think the digital ones can lead to people, completely overanalyzing it and driving themselves a little bit potty, to be honest with you. And that kind of stuff scares me because you start mucking around, making decisions and altering things that don't need to be messed around with. So I'm a massive advocate for the liquid. It tells you everything you need to know. You just don't need the massive accuracies. Might be something pH. I can get it with a pH pen. The pH ones can be quite hard to read, but ultimately all you need to know with your pH is that you've got it stable.
Yeah.
You know that it's not a case of you need to know exactly what the pH reading is. As long as you can roughly tell it. The big thing with pH is stability. So again, the colour ones are going to know because you're going to know from one test to the next if that's changing or swinging. KH, best method is the liquid. I'm not sure it's actually the only method out there for it. So for me, unless you're into the real sciencey side, laboratory side, and all the rest of it, I just don't see any point in the digital ones other than people wanting to know something they don't really know, to be honest.
Yeah. Is that the same for like testing? A lot of people seem to look at TDS as well within the ponds. Is that another thing that you wouldn't concentrate
I
on?
can't remember the last time I tested TDS, Jordan, to be honest with you. I know a few people's been touching on this one, but again, it's getting into the realms of just massively overcomplicating stuff. Come back. Obviously, the digital meter is your only method for testing that. So if that's the route you're going down, as with salt as well, you can get salinity meters, but the digital ones are just far better and easier in them cases. But yeah, TDS, I see so many people hung up on managing that when I'd rather be more focused on the feeding regime and the water temperatures and all the rest of it. And you got someone getting hung up on keeping the TDS low, then possibly not feeding the fish enough to actually grow them and raise them properly. If you get where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So keeping it simple is key, really.
It's too easy. What I see a lot of is people analysing one particular area when it's about the whole picture of everything in order to achieve them results. When you're fighting the battle against TDS, ultimately it's meaning changing a lot of water. to keep that level down. So you either keep it down by not introducing, too much waste, i.e. not too much food, which in the realms of raising fish, you're just not going to get the results. Or then ultimately, if you are doing that, it's putting a lot of fresh water through your system as well. And that comes on to a whole other conversation, to be honest with you. Something we're doing some work with for Koi Talk at the minute is because water purification and mains water and the trickle out method is something we're seeing create so many problems. And that all coming down to the serious lack of sort of knowledge and understanding there is out there about it. But actually seeing it all doing more harm than good in a lot of ways, fish health wise, certainly from a skin luster and sort of condition wise as well. So again, my advocate, you'll hear me drum on about it, keep it simple. And for me, there's more things I'd be worried about than making sure. I mean, some of the TDS monitoring I see and the obsession with it, it's crazy in my opinion. And proof being in the pudding. I can't remember. It was decades ago that I last tested it, and just look what I'm doing with the fish. You've probably seen the results in my videos.
Look at the Hyatt series, for example.
It speaks for itself. One of those heel saw, he grew 43 centimeters in a season, and we're talking, heavy stocking, heavy everything. It just get the rule book and set it on fire, basically.
Yeah.
So, but my focus is a lot on the food, the regime, what the fish need, and then making the environment work around it, to be honest with you. I do know, obviously, excessive high TDS, but that from when we're talking from a hardness perspective, when it's coupled in that whole package, super hard water, I have seen that have an adverse effect on fish. But we've got pretty decent mains water. It's pretty neutral. Don't swing one way or the other too much, and it works a treat.
Yeah. I've got another question regarding DPD4 tablets.
Yeah.
So I know that they check for chlorine. Now there's a lot of mixed opinions and thoughts on DPD4 tablets, as in, do they check for chlorine and chloramines in the water?
I'm gonna cut you off there, Jordan, a little bit, because it's not something I've ever used. I know of people using them. Right. To be honest with you, or if we often, I'd change the purifiers regularly, but the bit of checking we'll do if I do. This is the one bit I contradict myself a little bit. I have got one of the little Hannah pocket testers for chlorine, which is quite handy. But yeah. The DPD4, from what they tell you what you need to know. If there's something tracing and showing up on it, you need to change your cartridges. But likewise, I'd be wanting to change the cartridges as frequently as I can anyway, not leaving it to the last minute.
So how often would you recommend changing your cartridges?
You need to, obviously, all of your cartridges. Seeing the wife's watching again. Making sure I've got everything in order. You can't, obviously every cartridge is spec'd differently, and it's something that really needs to be paid attention to. Again, having some test method like the tablets is a great indicator, but you want to keep on top of them. Again, depending on you've got the carbon blocks, metals cartridges will have different specifications, but a lot more frequently than what they generally say. Don't max a cartridge out right to the last minute, because you don't know. If you're just going to tip over that edge. And this is something, the reason why we're doing the research, because it was years back, a woman called Anne Telford. I'm not sure how many people are aware of, and she was absolutely brilliant with all the water equipment. And she's not been about, I've not been able to get hold of her for a while, but some of the stuff I learned from her back then about how inefficient a lot of the purifiers actually were on the market because of the level of variables, the amount of chlorine, the levels, the water temperatures, the levels of chloramine in there, and then with metals cartridges in particular, carbon blocks versus granular carbon in big blues, and the grade of the carbon and how effective that is. So much to it, and this is one of the reasons why I think we're seeing so many issues coming from people who are trickling quite large amounts of water, because even though they think they're purifying it well, they're actually not, and they're not set up well enough to defend against, big surges in chemicals put into water by water companies as and when it happens. And the metal side of it even bigger, because it's only stuff you can typically test for if you're having it done at laboratory level. So tricky things, purifiers. That's not an easy question to answer, to be honest. But all I know is they expire a lot faster than most people think. The one thing I did pick up from her at the time is a lot of these cartridges are quoted for US situations and US setups, and that the capacity drastically alters when they get back to the UK and for our mains water. So just sit tight on that one, because we're trying to get the proper answers for people, because I really think this is a big topic that needs addressing overall in regards to mains water and purification.
Yeah, well, I tend to change my cartridges every 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah,
which I think is reasonable.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're not crazy expensive, are they?
No, well, they're like £5-6 for most of them, so it's not relatively expensive, really.
Yeah.
Moving on to basically my last question. I know you briefly touched on this before in one of your other question and answers, and that's Hikui. So, does having fish in, say, a green pond ultimately minimize the risk of further? So say if there's a fish in the pond that's got Hikui, you basically wanting to, you're never going to get it right, I know that, because it's a form of skin cancer at the end of the day, but you want to improve that fish to make it look, aesthetically pleasing to you. So is there anything that you can do with your water, as like running green water as such, to improve that fish?
It possibly would help, because you'll be obviously cutting the UV out to the biggest extent. But if that's the case and you've got one fish in a collection that's suffering, personally, I wouldn't be making massive changes just to accommodate that one fish.
You would move that fish on.
So if it's a problem where you've got issues and it's reoccurring throughout a bigger percentage of the population, then you need to look at the system as a whole. I think if you remember, it was Jeff Wynn I was speaking to about that. I think the systems as they are these days make it so they're not actually part of the problem anymore. If you was getting a lot, you would have to look at fundamentally what's possibly wrong with your system and causing the issues. But if you've got one fish in that scenario, I wouldn't be making big adaptations to the pond just to cater for that one fish, because you potentially put the others in jeopardy a little bit.
Yeah.
So the best thing you can do for that one is try, like I say, propolis has been one of the best known sort of treatments for sort of keeping it at bay. You're never going to stop it and cure it completely. And even if you did, there'll be some damage there still. But I would just that one fish, deal with that. Try some of the propolis, see if you can cut it, but don't make changes to the whole system just for that one particular fish.
Yeah. Well, I once had a Matsue Kohaku.
Yeah.
I had it off a previous hobbyist, to be honest with you. And I know for a fact that this fish had been, I don't really want to use the word, but been doctored as such to try and remove that. I could see it within the pigment of the scales in the skin. And it, to be honest with you, it did get worse. And ultimately, I did move that fish on, to be honest with you. That's the reason why I brought it up today regarding Hikui.
Yeah. Not something like that. The problem is it does lasting damage underneath to the pigment typically. So that's why if you can actually stop the cancer progressing as such, there's still going to be the issue sat underneath. So it's a tough one, but luckily, like I say, I think in the more modern era of koi keeping, it's not a big problem and not one that generally is one for many koi keepers to worry about, to be honest.
I think that's it from me, Ricky.
Yeah, the fancies are looking great, mate, by the way. I think
Thanks
just
very
for
much.
everyone out there, give my old man a bit of a plug. I think Jordan's bought quite a lot of these from my dad, who does them. Anybody watching who's into them, Westview Fancies on Facebook.
Highly
Shameless plug,
recommend.
Yeah, he don't do a bad job, does he?
No, he does a good job.
Sound. Anyway, thanks for your time, Jordan. And I think
Yep.
we'll take a few of these questions that are coming now. Right, folks. What have we got on here? Shade would be an advantage, and pond positioning, the main one. Absolutely. Shade does want to be considered. I think a lot of the issue with that is it's actually balancing getting the maximum water temperatures. If you put it in too much shade all the time, what little precious sunlight we have here in the UK, you're not going to take full advantage of it. And I do think this, again, just knowing how the British summers are, is less of a problem for us in the UK than it is for guys out in Asia, for example, and other maybe European countries where there's a lot of intense sunlight hitting the water for longer periods of time. But yes, shade helps. But to be honest with you, again, talking about my experience, we've got a lot of the fish in polythene greenhouses where obviously the UV is intensified. And these are not problems that I'm experiencing on a regular basis. So again, what it comes down to is for me, it's just looking at stuff that is it in reality a big problem for that many people out there? No, I don't think it is. So I don't think this is something people need to be getting too freaked out about. Just don't see it as that big of a problem. But bit of shade can go a long way. But I just don't think in the UK, if we manage to get a decent summer, maybe. But yeah, not one to flap about too much. So, what other questions have we got, Steve? Do you want to pull a couple more up on screen? Yes. So swim bladder problems more frequent in deeper ponds with aerated bottom drains. Have seen this more so in deeper ponds. Obviously, there's a lot more pressure on the fish, and again, just something that I believe is excessive. We don't need really deep ponds, and some people are using it as a mechanism to make up water volume. Personally, I would avoid it. Shallow, I mean, the deepest pond I've got on site at the minute is about 4 feet, I think. So not a lot whatsoever. I prefer to try and get as much surface area as possible. And even on that, more rectangular shaped surface area. So there's a bigger length to swim as opposed to square or rounded. Aerated bottom drains, yes. To be honest with you, I'm not a massive fan. I get the whole concept from a pond build perspective, because we can get you get the flow rates, the sort of flow direction that can help drag the waste to the drain. I get it from that, but I'm not a big fan of the flow pattern that it creates. I look at where koi thrive, in mud ponds, in the wild, or wherever it is they're being, and this directional flow created by aerated bottom drains is not something they're naturally sort of used to. It's more, this direction. Or possibly where it's just one way, and that's what I prefer to do. I like to have all the flow at one end of the system, aeration as well, so it's at its strongest point, and then it tapers off towards the end of the pond where there's then a still area, and it's up to the fish how they choose to use it. And I generally tend to do the feeding at the stiller area as well. For tosai, it's a lot more irrelevant, but as the fish get older and a bit bigger, try and watch them trying to feed in heavy flow patterns. They're not a big fan of it, and it can be quite disruptive. So yeah, I like a stiller area for that. And absolutely, the most common instances of swim bladder problems I've seen has been with deeper ponds, but again, it's not the only cause. So if you are planning on building a new pond, don't be thinking you need to get that thing as deep as possible. 5 feet of depth is absolutely ample. And to be honest with you, I'd don't just do it just to build water volume. It's a waste. So just want to pull another one on, Steve. Ooh, nice one. I would like to hear your opinion on RO to lower TDS and pH. Also, in your opinion, ozone systems. Right. I think we've probably gathered, or a lot of you by now will probably gather a bit of this: simplicity. And for me personally, neither of the things mentioned on there, RO or ozone, get anywhere close to being simple. everything I like to do, and again, everything I've sort of been based on around, the guys in Japan, is working with what you've got and making the most of what you've got. Now, the RO debate is not one I've dipped my toe in with. I've never felt the need to, from where I'm at. I do see it, for people, I think I mentioned earlier, excessively hard water, and I mean really, really hard. I've seen that where you tend to have to feed a lot of food and the fish look like they're not getting anywhere. It's almost like having to force feed them to get to move. And it does seem to age the skin a bit faster. But this is where I'm talking a guy I've dealt with in a certain area where, KH has been between 12 and 14. It's absolutely crazy hard water. If you've got relatively neutral parameters and it's not excessive, I don't see the need to be adding a layer of complication to the system. One benefit I can see to our RO is in the sort of, when we've touched on the trickle in, trickle out basis. One thing it does is obviously strips everything out of the water, which is a benefit because a lot of what is in the tap water is creating and causing problems. But yeah, I still wouldn't be adding the amount of instability you can bring into the system with RO by running such a low KH in that environment, and all the ins and outs of that system. For me, again, that's something that's built for the few who are banging into the water masses if they feel it works for them getting where they want to get. Fair play. I think in the old debate where it come from that, Japan's all soft water, again, they are ultimately working with what they've got. And for me, again, this is about bigger picture. It's a lot more than just one element of, it's soft water because that's what it's like in a mud pond. Well, there's a lot more to a mud pond than just soft water. Consider the temperatures the mud ponds are at. Consider all the natural food that they're feeding on constantly throughout the day. Consider the stocking levels. One fish having potentially tens of thousands of gallons of water for the summer. Just so much in there than focusing on just one element. Even when the fish are in the fish houses, it's not just about the water. You've got so much there down to technique and bloodline and water management, and not just the fact they've got soft water. So yes, do agree. You've seen the sort of negative effects of excessively hard water, but again, the instability it can bring for me. It's just not worth it because it adds that thing where you've got to be so on it all the time because you're putting them at risk of a pH crash. Again, breeders I've worked with, when I've been out there in the summer, the soft water, you talk about problems. I remember one day we'd been working and there was heavy rain forecast. We dropped everything, went back to the fish houses, loaded the trucks up with crushed oyster shells to get out to the fry ponds to basically waders on. We're layering crushed oyster shell all over the bottom of the mud ponds just to give them enough capacity to try and keep the water stable enough from what was going to drop out of the sky, potentially plummet the pH and wipe fry out in mass numbers. So yeah, when you've got something that's that fragile, I'm not sure you particularly want to be emulating that and adding that layer of complexity to your hobby. Regards, again, there's a lot more to all that, but all I'll say is just look at the bigger picture. It's not just about one thing. You can look at anything and try and break it down to this, that, or the other. It's always a bigger picture. There's always a bigger layer of complexity to it. Ozone, again, I'm just not interested in anything like that. To me, it's unnatural. It's adding something in there, again, where if you get it wrong, you're going to create more harm than good. And when it gets to them realms, I don't see the point in it. I don't get it. There's plenty of ways of creating the effects of ozone. You can use UV sterilizers to help obviously get the bacteria levels down in the water if that's what you felt was necessary. Yeah, adding something like that into the water where, again, you get it wrong and you've got massive problems, just takes away the enjoyment and how simple koi keeping can be for me. And I don't really see the upsides outweighing the downs for me. So yeah, I'm sure that topic will keep coming up a few times, but for now, that's my very short take on it. Simplicity, guys. Keep it nice and simple. Keep the hobby enjoyable. You can achieve fantastic results by keeping it simple. using basic, good but basic equipment, and not paying a fortune for all of this stuff. I mean, ozone systems cost bloody thousands of pounds, and I just, it's fucking ridiculous in my opinion. Sorry to swear there, but it is what it is. Right, Steve, let's get our next guest on now. Chris, we've got Chris back from Elite, who is actually our stand-in for this evening because we were unfortunately who we had planned couldn't make it. And Chris, I believe, is bringing a load of questions from the members of his WhatsApp community. And I'm actually on there. I interact with the guys quite frequently. And some of them seem to be full of questions, but are very camera shy, Chris, aren't they?
We're a little bit shy, aren't they? We're trying to speak to you, but you never know.
I don't get it. But anyway, we'll keep trying with that one. But in the meantime, I believe you're bringing some of their questions, buddy. So
I've got some questions here, and they're based around two areas, really. One is the selection of koi. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get your eye or your experience in a couple of the points that we're always mentioning. One of them being luster.
Yeah.
The second one being body shape, body line.
Yeah.
Third one being bone structure.
Okay.
So if you could probably start with the luster one.
I'm just going to write it down because no doubt this will go completely off topic.
Yeah. The
luster, body shape, and bone structure. Cool. So, what is it particular about skin luster?
Skin luster is just. Can you explain what it is? I mean, it's it's the shine to the koi, the luster of the koi, the way the koi looks. If you could give your explanation on it, and then I'd probably ask if there's any way that we can improve the luster, or if there's any way that we can unknowingly damage the luster on the koi.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in a nutshell, skin luster is the shine on the skin, like you say. It's not there with all fish. It is a quality element that's there in some fish and not in others. And there's levels to it. You've got it on the extreme level where you get fully scaled wagoi koi that look doits. I'm sure you've seen them. I think we've looked at fish like that up at my place before. It's that real epitome. You get that ultimate shine where you get it does just look absolutely superb. And then at the lower end of it, it's where the skin looks completely flat because there's no luster and no shine there. And being a quality element of the skin, if there is no luster, we can't really call it high quality skin. It could have other skin elements, the kiwi, the sashi, the pigmentation quality, all that, and then the luster. It's real the package of what we define as skin quality.
Yeah.
So without that luster, and it probably is the fundamental bit that a lot of people actually overlook. They're aware of luster when it's there and really in your face, but the more subtle parts of it probably do get overlooked and certainly lost at the other elements because you're sort of trying to break it all down and analyze it. So it's not one thing, to be honest, you can't really talk about it all that much in regards. It's the shine, it's there, it's not in every fish, and when it's really there, it's something to behold.
It's that element of when you're looking upon with 100 fish and that one stands out. That'll be what's drawing it towards your eye.
Yeah, so and it is something that can improve with time as well. And it is something like we say in there. So I think that's the bit to talk about is that, can you improve it and can it be damaged? Absolutely, because obviously part of skin luster is to do with the mucus layer. And that is the mucus layer absolutely ebbs and flows and is not just a constant, it's not just constantly in good condition. So improve it. Yes, you can. I believe, and this is a big one for me, it's going to get onto that topic that seems to have gone every week. Gut health, it seems to be a massive one. So obviously a lot of it coming from the diet has a massive impact on the condition of the skin.
Yeah.
Again, there's a lot to be said about gut health in humans and what it can do. In fact, I've actually recently read something about why in Japan the coronavirus cases and deaths from corona have been so low. And some research at the minute is suggesting it's to do with a strain of gut bacteria that the Japanese have.
Yeah.
Again, that's not something I'm sort of, but that was a news piece that I read, and it makes a lot of sense. And when you sort of see, the potential effects that can have, it's absolutely with the fish, the same sort of thing. And so diet, nutrition, absolutely key in that one. And then obviously the water. This is obviously the other big one that can have a massive impact on skin luster now. I've seen excessive UV damage skin luster.
Yeah,
absolutely. Too much of it being too damaging, from almost like a sort of sunburn effect, without seeing any visible sunburn, but having an effect on sort of over hardening the skin and it losing that shine. And then the stuff we can't really see going on in the water, and the big one here being the metals.
Yeah.
So obviously bad water, if you've got a nasty ammonia spike or something like that, that's gonna temporarily hit the mucus. It always will, but it will recover back from it. The metals thing, however, is one that I'm just seeing more and more and more as being a huge problem.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if we touched on this last time, but using the trickle in, we've noticed that the fish will start flashing.
Yeah.
So we've gone away from the trickle stuff, and interestingly enough, there's something there in the water that upsets, and it passes through the big blue. That we use, and we pass the water through slowly. So
I think everyone needs to remember that the carbon blocks and all that will only work against chloramines to some extent, not all super effective against chloramines, but they will not touch metals.
No, that's right.
And even the so-called metals cartridges out there that aren't a lot of money, to be honest with you, they're not worth. They're not worth it, because from what we know of them, they absorb very little, and then actually, again, from what I've been told, they can at a certain point begin releasing, some of the metals that built up back into the pond in higher doses.
Yeah.
So major problem this, and just again, ponds I've seen where excessive amounts of water are being trickled in, it flattens the skin, it takes that shine away, and it just completely takes it off the fish. And I know it's from what's coming in from that mains water. The trickle out system was devised in Japan. That was something that I believe the late Peter Waddington brought into the industry over from Japan. It's something they use a lot, but the only guys that use it are the ones that have got access to natural underground water.
Yeah.
It's not stuff that's having heaps of additives thrown into it to make it safe for humans. It's being pumped straight out of the ground. We've got mud ponds where they're being filled by snow. I mean, it's not getting much purer.
Yes, that's right.
And that's the kind of environment the koi are living in. So yeah, if I had that kind of trickle and that kind of water supply, I'd have trickles running all over the place. But I haven't, so I keep water changing to a bare minimum because I just don't trust what's coming in.
Yeah. Something else that was touched on briefly earlier is chlorine out the source water. Now, and we've come across this several times in the shop. People have turned up with an unexpected ammonia spike, and we can't really get to the bottom of it. The way to really tell whether or not there's chlorine in the water is to do an ammonia test on your source water, and then if you get that ammonia test showing positive, give the water company a ring and ask them if they're adding the chlorine, because you'll have
advice, Chris.
Measures to get it out when it's going. So
But but massive. The skin luster is a fragile thing. To get it to absolute peak, and I tend to find I get mine to the absolute peak in that environment where the diet's good, water temperature's decent as well, so the immune system's working really well, and we're just not interfering with the environment too much. It's again why I've always been a big advocate of K1 and fluid beds. Ever since I've had my first Nexus running and seen ponds running Nexus, it creates that much cleaner, healthier environment. I believe if you've got a good ecosystem, that's what we're trying to create, because we're in charge, and it's this fine ecosystem. And you think of the damage that chlorine does chloramines and all the rest of it, especially them, and they're getting in there in small doses on a frequent basis. Not just the fish we're damaging, it's that whole ecosystem that develops. So yeah, you can't do it with all filters. If we go back to the days of multi-bays, you know, them things needed a lot of interference just to keep them right. But for me, yeah, that sort of protected fluid bed, the Nexus, and you know, you get from K1 and that whole concept, change the game in so many ways. And that's the thing for me that allows for creating a much healthier system without needing to pound heaps of fresh water through that can upset the apple cart.
You can see it, can't you? You can see the water's got a natural sparkle to it, and it's not, you know, to me, sometimes I look at water, I think that's flat. There's nothing there, it's flat.
Yeah.
And
I think you've seen up at my place, you know, skin luster is something I really do manage to perfect to quite a high level.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the combination of a lot of them things we've mentioned, and yeah, that lack of too much, you know, fresh water interfering.
Yeah, and the clarity of the ponds as well, because there's a massive effort to keep the ponds as clear as possible. You know, and it's very rare that I've seen one of your ponds up your place that is crystal clear. You know, but it works. It keeps the fish in.
It's part of it, obviously. How that is in the water is just protecting from the super extremes of UV in there. But it's because, again, I'm not interfering with the environment too much.
Yeah,
and it fend for itself. And there's a lot to be said. And again, it just comes back to that absolute simplicity part.
Yeah, keep it simple. Yeah, straightforward.
Completely.
It's working. Don't change it.
No, and it is obviously, we're looking for tweaks and changes and all the bits just to push on from where. But I'll not be changing anything fundamental. You'll not see me setting up RO units or adding ozone or starting to trickle water unless I get a magical underground feed put in. And even then, obviously, you can get trace elements in if you're in a bad spot, some trace elements coming up which you won't want and might have to treat, but ultimately it's not coming up full of them nasty chlorines.
No, that's right. So so that's skin luster covered. So that's covered it for the people that was asking. Some of these questions are really hard to answer. I know it's how long is that piece of string type of question.
We can always boil it down. Sorry, so we've got body shape and bone structure then. Yeah. All right. So I think when I first started sort of getting my head around this all that time ago, I saw, I simplify it now, body shape and bone structure are two different things. So that's the very first thing people have to get their head around. And for me, bone structure never changes. There's nothing you can do to it. It's there. It literally is the structure of the fish. Yeah. Body shape is changeable. You can influence it, you can affect it because it's all to do with fat, muscle, everything else that attaches to the bone structure. Yeah. So body shape, again, you can change it. So it's a bit tough without any. In fact, Steve, can we just flick the Dainichi pictures on, because this is a big thing what I absolutely love with Dainichi fish. The bone structure and the body shapes that these things develop is unbelievable. So if we look at a lot of these, you can see some reoccurring themes, and this is from a bone structure perspective. So if we look at body shape right now, none of these are particularly, they're not big chunky fish. You're not carrying too much weight. That's because they're only a year old, and we've not developed all of that body on the fish yet. It's something that comes over time as you build the fat up and they build the muscle up. The bone structure, however, which is one of my big obsessions with these, if we look at all of these fish, bone structure is the outline, it's the skeleton, it's what it can do. Now, when you actually learn to read bone structures properly and understand them, they are the complete roadmap to how that body will look as that fish grows over time. It never changes. So if you see a short sort of round head, don't expect that that's going to grow out. That fish will always have a short round head. Likewise, if it looks a little bit stumpy with that short head, that's always going to be a stumpy fish. Don't expect it to grow out because it's the structure of the fish and it'll never change. So if we look at all these pictures, you can see the biggest thing, the bone structure part straight away, is at the mouths. Look at all the mouths. They've got really quite broad mouths across every single fish on there. And then obviously the bone structure carries on the head. So if we look at the heads, there's good length on the head, so from the mouth to the base of the skull, good length across all of them. And then again, you can see there's good width. So the width of the head from the back of the skull down to the mouth all carry really, really, really well on all of those fish, to be honest. So, and the head is probably the most fundamental part of the bone structure, because you've probably all seen them fish that hit 70, 80 centimeters, and they're carrying big body, but they've got no head. So it does make the body look shit. It's not a nice, pleasant fish to look at. And that's because the bone structure starting at the head was never strong enough to match the weight that the body could gain. And that's what creates that. So, and what we look for, once you've got that head set right, it's then a case of looking at, right, what's the rest of the body going to do? So the next area typically we're going to look at is how the sort of weight carries down the fish, and this is where structure and body shape overlap a little bit. So from a body perspective, in these young fish in particular, what I don't want to see is any bumps or dips. Just want a nice steady curve from behind the head down to the peduncle, not too much thickness on the peduncle, because again, what that can indicate in the structure is that the whole body might become a little bit too wide as they get bigger. So I like a little bit of a taper. So you're hitting your widest point about mid-body near the dorsal fin. And then from there, you're tapering to a thinner peduncle, just not too thin, but not too fat. And then, another area to gauge of the structure is where you see the backbone from behind the head to the front of the dorsal fin. That's a really key area as well, which there we want to see, a good bit of distance from behind the head to the dorsal fin. That's absolutely paramount. And then the sort of last part of the bone structure to consider is the height of the fish, and not one that too many talk about. The height is incredibly important. So as you're looking at it from a side view, which we can't hear, unfortunately, you want to see some height leading up to from behind the head to the dorsal fin. Yeah. And the reason you want that height is because it's another area. When weight goes on these fish, it goes on the whole body. So if you've not got that, if you've not got the height, what can tend to happen is, as that weight gains, it's not going to gain it. You're losing that area on the top of the fish, if you get me, where weight can be gained, because it's not actually there. So the weight's going to force on the sides and on the bottom of the fish. You can take them off the screen now, Steve. So the weight is going to gain, like I say, sideways and underneath, because there's no height for weight to be put on. And that's what then creates them fatter looking big bellied fish as well. Yeah. So structure is everything, and I literally from a fish being 15 centimeters, when you understand bone structure, you can understand the type of body that the fish is going to have. So, like I say, body shapes can be influenced. So you can quite easily, I can gain a lot of mass on a body straight away by keeping a slightly cooler water temperature and feeding a high growth food, because the excessive fat is going to bulk the body up quickly. Likewise, I can slim it down by having a higher water temperature and reducing feeding and changing the diet very quickly. They're going to strip it off and metabolize it. Yeah. So, and feeding a bad food, that's going to create fats that cling to the bottom of the gut and probably going to add all that weight on at the bottom. So that can all be influenced. The structure, you will never change. It's there from day one.
Yeah. So it's more important in the younger koi. That bone structure is critical in the tosai.
Yeah.
Than this side, yeah.
It's what I used to tell everything. I can tell a fish that's going to really grow, one that's going to do all right, one that's just probably going to grow all right but stay a relatively smaller fish, and one that's just going to turn into a rugby ball. Yeah. We can tell all that from the structure.
Yeah, that's feeding into one of the other main topics that keeps coming up, and that is, the people are seeing what we're saying about the feeding and the regularity of the feeding, good quality food. It affects everything in the fish, not just growth. But we're being asked, for somebody who just has the pond and they go out and feed the fish twice a day, can they reasonably expect to have any of these results? Or will they take longer to gain the same results as what we might force in 2 or 3 years?
Substantially longer.
Yeah. So
substantially.
but Yeah.
I still stand by what I say. I think the majority of koi ponds out there are probably underfed.
Yeah.
And I do believe that, but again, that's not anybody's fault. There's a serious lack of knowledge and educational material out there to tell anybody any different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do believe that even from a basic calculation of just giving the fish enough for sort of general maintenance, they're probably being drastically underfed in the majority of ponds.
Yeah. I also think it's early to get them young and get them growing. You know, it's harder to achieve if you get a fish that's 4 or 5 years old and small. You know,
at that point, you've lost a lot because you know the bone structure's pretty much at 4 or 5 year old. Your bone structure's pretty much formed and set. So you'll eke a bit out, but you've really stunted it. Over sort of tosai to nisai. If you lose a bit from tosai to nisai, you can easily pull that back. But as each year progresses, and you don't get the size on them, then you are losing out on size potential to the point where you will stunt them eventually.
Yeah.
But just coming back to the body shape bit, one more to sort of fit in is as well. There isn't just one uniform body shape out there. You know, there is an ideal, and you'll probably have read this and seen this somewhere. That ideal being the sort of submarine shape they used to speak about, and that was a really old thing, and that came back from sort of days when Matsunosuke was a really prominent lineage in a lot of fish, and that did have a very submarine like shape. You know, no bulges, no nasty dips, just strong, powerful, a long body. But that's really not been the trend for a long time now, because we've seen the likes of Sakai, Issa, Dainichi, more and more of them fish that's coming with the big power in the bodies, big shoulder, bigger peduncles, just completely different beasts. But that isn't to say that either one is a bad body. I think that's what people got to get their head around. Just as with humans, bodies, we've got different body shapes.
Yeah,
we're all built differently, and it's not that, you know, some are good, some are bad, or some are good, some bad. It's with them, but on the good end, that's a lot of abuse, that, Chris. On the good end of it, a good body will have varying different shapes, if that makes sense, and that then can become relative to the bloodline of the fish, or even the variety of the fish. You cannot compare the body of Kohaku and Sankey to that of Showa. So Showa and Shirotsuori in particular, always had a slightly shorter, but tending to be deeper, more powerful body. That was a natural part of that fish, and it is one thing that limited the eventual size they could get to, because they just didn't naturally have it as a variety. Whereas Kohaku and Sankey, for example, do keep that more elegant sort of submarine style, and why those lineages then achieved greater size than Showa. Again, where that changes, but that's not to say either are bad. You have to keep it relative to the variety.
Yes, yeah.
And likewise, just going to Kohaku, for example, you know, the Sakai Kohaku is incredibly powerful. You know, we're talking tall, sometimes almost looking a little bit too short. Not in all of them, in some lineages, but it's this super powerful fish, which again, that body, you know, some might look at it and go, that's not for me, but it's not bad. It's just a different preference, because they do manage to carry it really well.
Yes.
But then if we move to, let's have a think, Hoshikin, for example, we're talking old Tomoyan bloodline and some Sensuke in there as well. That lineage carries a little bit more elegant than the Sakai one. And that's not to say either is bad. You know, we're talking about fish here that will have cracking bodies. It's just a different style. So that's important to remember. And then, like I say, coming to the Showa element, Showa just have naturally a different body. Bit shorter, really stocky and powerful. That's where they were at. And that was until that point came where even now you've got bloodlines like that. Some of Issa's are like it. Issa booked the trend because he made that body and then made it massive. You it took that body and all of a sudden started producing these huge Showas. But the biggest change to that, again, where it can all get a bit muddy, is that if anybody's aware of the Momotaro Mako Showa, that lineage was actually made. So the reason that project was started was to create Showa that could grow to 1 meter, the same as what was happening with Sankey and Kohaku at Momotaro, for example. And what they did there was crossed the Mako Kohaku lineage that they had into Showa. And that's what formed the Mako Showa. And then eventually, I can't remember the name of the fish, but obviously they took the All Japan Grand Champion with Showa from that lineage, over 1 meter. Lion Queen, I think it was.
Yeah. So in some of the breeders, they'll have their own characteristics, although
exactly,
it's very similar. But
and then what it comes down to, so it's not about assassination. That we will always have preferences.
Yes, yeah.
So if you like them all, there's still the old lineage, Shintaro and the Matsunosuke brother in Isawa Nishikigoi Center, Toshio Sakai. They're still producing from the old original Matsunosuke lineage. Yeah. So what that lineage did, I mean, the Matsunosuke line was phenomenal. So for those that don't know, Matsunosuke was a famous Sankey lineage, many years ago, way before all of our time. But yeah, obviously Go Sankey was sort of maxing out at 70 centimeters back then. So what Matsunosuke did, the brother Toshio Sakai in Isawa, took it upon himself to try and produce the first 1 meter Go Sankey. And he did that by crossing the old original Magoi back in with Sankey. So you've got Magois growing huge with that really long, powerful, I say powerful in its own sense, but quite long, lean, submarine type body. So he crossed that Magoi blood in, and you can just imagine what that is, the sort of gene tree of Koi, they're absolutely worlds apart. He's crossed this original black cart back in with Sankey, and I believe it took him an absolute age to finally get, a stable lineage where he was happy. And ultimately, that lineage did produce, speaking of it, it produced the fish, which I'd actually stalled. I can't remember what size it had stalled at, but it was a fish that Momotaro actually ended up owning. And Momotaro took the fish, raised it over 1 meter, and it won the All Japan Grand Champion prize.
Yeah.
So it was the first lineage to do it. But then the drawback was, as things developed, these fish, they fill out. So they're talking really, really lean, slender tosai, nisai, that do fill out. But now as trends have shifted, they don't fill out to the extent that you see the Kohaku or Dainichi power and width on the body. They tend to stay leaner. Still get phenomenal size. We're seeing Shintaro raise fish, still now over 90 centimeters and beyond constantly. But, that's not to say that body's bad. That body's not bad. It's just that if you prefer the power, it's no good buying that. You need to be buying a Sakai or Dainichi or a different lineage that produces it.
Yes, yeah.
So I hope that makes sense, because I'm not into obviously things being assassinated. You can't look at them fish and go, that body on that shit. It's not shit. It's good. It's just different to the other ones out there.
Yeah, you've got to be careful what variety you pick. If you're looking for a big fish, you don't want to be picking something like a Kumundru or that.
No, exactly. Then they've all got their limitations naturally as well, and again, different sorts of bodies to them all. So
we've got
it's a great topic. Yes, Chris. Yeah.
I think this ties in nice. What makes a tosai a jumbo tosai?
Just the size it is.
Just the size. So it's not an individual gene that one fish is carrying different to.
No, a lot of it comes down to raising technique.
Yeah.
And it is quite easy to raise fish on from most lineages. You can push the size and make them jumbo tosai. NND was a good example. The guys at NND I've spent a lot of time with. So, they used to raise Umo Showa, Marusho Sankey. They used to raise tosai about 20 to 25 cm, which very interestingly, way back even. So when I first started going to Japan, 20, 25 cm was considered jumbo tosai. That's what they were, because normal tosai would sort of be 15, 18 cm. Then all of a sudden, these new jumbo tosai came at 20, 25 cm, and that was amazing. So they'd raise fish around that kind of size. Nisai would hit, say, up to 45 centimeters. They'd be 40, 45 on average. 30, 35 is still an average size Nisai at a lot of places. And then, what happened when those individuals formed NND, they had a change in mindset, they had some new facilities, and overnight, the following year, just through changing technique and pond space availability, they started producing the bigger jumbo tosai. So we was looking at tosai at 40, 45 cm, which were the same size as Nisai from the previous year. So they'd not changed anything. It was literally just, not ending the lineage, they just changed the technique. So and it's quite possible with a lot. So technique comes down to it. What will limit the eventual size? So we can race them on. I mean, you're seeing in the bigger lineages, Momotaro again, Sakai's. I mean, Sakai seem to produce some absolutely huge tosai. We're talking in excess of 50 centimeters.
Yes. Wow.
At 12 months old, and that now is becoming more and more common at the biggest farms, and probably another 10 years now we'll be looking back and jumbo tosai will be 45 to 55 centimeters. It's going to happen. I'm going to say come back from being 2025 a jumbo tosai now really. You're talking a good breeder, you're talking 40, 45 cms quite easily. Then as Nisai, then fish will be hitting 50, 55 cm, some getting on for 60. And in that Nisai realm, again, we're now seeing loads more Nisai over 60, edging up to 65 cm. And in some of the Muji varieties, we're getting Nisai hitting 70 cm on a regular basis. Konishi, Karashigoi, I've seen it in a Kawa 2 years on the bounce now. Kawa's had his top Nisai Karashigoi at 70 centimeters at 18 months old. It's absolutely phenomenal. But that's not to say, these jumbo tosai go Sankis, they can max out, they can shoot it on the size on for 3 or 4 years, but then they will be limited by the genetics of the bloodline.
Yes, yeah.
Seen it with Showa, a particular farm that I do quite a lot with, and they're racing on consistently. I can pretty much predict the size year after year up to Yonzai. All of a sudden, it drops off a cliff at year 5, where we're hitting the maximum end of what the fish can achieve, full stop. Yeah. So jumbo tosai. I mean, I'm talking these fish getting to like 75, 78, and it's dropping off as they're hitting the 80 border. So they're not small fish, but then it just goes to show, the main thing, fish over 80 and not just that common thing that are around everywhere like people think.
Yeah, definitely.
They're still pretty rare beasts in the grand scheme of things. Yeah.
They do exist. I think there's been some suggestion that jumbo tosai are a myth, but they're definitely there, aren't they?
Oh no, it's common practice, But what does happen as well? We can still quickly get tosai. So the smaller tosai, a lot of farms do from second crop spawnings. When they go into mud pond, they'll go in smaller at say 20, 25. But they will grow more in terms of centimeters gained than the jumbo tosai will.
Yes, yeah.
So they really can catch up. They'll always be that little bit further behind. More often than not, these big farms, it's because they do this second crop spawning, which is normally done around late July into August. Yeah. So the fish are just always behind the pack. It's not that those fish can't achieve the big sizes; they still can. It might just take them a little bit longer.
You've got to look at them Mawasai Hiyotsuhi that you did last year. Started out at 16 centimeters, and look at the size of them jumbo tosai by the end of the season. So
this is it. It's and that's raised bigger than those Hiyotsuhis. I think I've said it too. Were raised bigger than the breeder would raise them at his own farm. His average in his size like 30 to 35 centimeters, if in 40 at the maximum. Whereas we hit an average of sort of 43 to 48, biggest one being 50. And by the time we'd done, that biggest one that was 50 is now 57 cm cruising around. She's just not stopped.
Yeah.
So just while we're on that, I think we just had a question there from Paul. Do you think growing jumbo taro can be detrimental to the health of the fish? Yes, but this is more. This is come from the sort of force raising nature. So I'm not into. I like to give them an intense summer period. So with tosai, it's a little bit more. Well, obviously, because they're little, will be growing pretty much from being harvested in September. They're going to be growing for pretty much 12 months on the heat. Tosai need that to get the most out of them. But when we then come in off that first season, so the harvested at Nisai, I do believe it's paramount they get a bit of a resting period. It's the time where we get them obviously off the food, let the body recover, just give them some downtime, get them primed, ready for the next season. I have seen it where fish are pushed 24/7 around the clock, 365 days a year. It makes them look very old very quickly. I've seen that lead to swim bladder problems more often than not, and just loads of other related issues that just come from that intense sort of overfed environment, to be honest. So yes, absolutely, they can be overdone. Important, have a nice, when you're raising Nisai and beyond, have a good 5-6 months solid period of intense growing, then take them off and let them have 5-6 months of down period. It's going to do the overall skin condition a lot of good as well. Highly recommended that one, definitely. So, you got any more for me, Chris, or can we nip over to some of the
no, if you want to nip over to some of the others, I think we're just about covered.
Cool. Yep. Come on then, Steve, hit me with a few more, because I've not been paying any attention. It's too hard keeping up. Regarding koi jumping, if there's no problems in parasites, yes, they can do. I think it just seems to be a natural part of the behaviour. Certainly, when you move fish from one environment to another, got to be absolutely on the ball with that, because they get very jumpy because it's all a new environment to them. What you don't get, is if you've got very frequent jumping, that is indicating that there's some kind of problem. You might get the odd koi jump every now and again, but if they're doing it frequently, you need to investigate, because there's something there that's causing that for sure.
On that one, Ricky, we quite often find people that with the fish that are flashing a lot, usually there's a nitrite spike going as well. That the automatically think flukes. Nitrite really does irritate them. It
does, and likewise, it could be again. You've just topped up, a dose of bad water just gone into the pond from a water change, something like that. That can all cause it, flashing, jumping, irritation. So yeah, the odd one every now and again you could possibly get, but if it's any more than that, investigate. Absolutely. So yeah, we've got another one, Steve. You've been very camera shy tonight, Steve, by the way.
I'm hiding in the background. I am here.
He's got your jacket on as well. Look at that.
Well,
fantastic.
Yeah. One of us had to.
Right, I've got one from Jeff. If you're looking at the search, look at male coin differently to female, given the cost of females. How I would look at that one is, again, this comes down to what you can get for your money, and this is the big thing for me. What I'm getting, that question is almost deemed irrelevant, Jeff, to be honest with you, because if your budget doesn't stretch to female, you want to be buying male anyway. So look at that. I'm just trying to fully digest the question. Not sure I get it. So no, I mean, male, female, obviously females we know can come with some risk, but that's not saying that every female fish his body's just dropping out all over the place. It can be a little bit more temperamental to look after. But coming back to the earlier part, me and Chris have been speaking about, if the bone structure's good, the body shape, the body line, everything like that is all in order and it's raised well, it's these problems, you're going to avoid them. If there's certain things you can do, i.e. feeding a bad diet to a female fish, you're probably going to make it a bit more gut heavy, whereas you might get away with that with a male fish, for example. But no, with Dainichi, again, that question really takes away for me that the main focus is of whatever your budget is, it's getting the most amount of fish and quality of fish for the budget, which is, again, that comes down to, more than likely at Dainichi, I mean, the males obviously carry substantial price tags as well. So for me, it's not about how it's going to develop, certainty, risk, all the rest of it. because there'll be male fish that carry risk of the quality deteriorating if you get the wrong one. So in the particular instance of Dainichi, again, two things I won't sacrifice. When it comes to getting the most fish for your budget, don't just chase female, because that's going to put a massive hike and put a lot of stuff out of the way for you. And don't actually chase the name. So, you know, if you have got, and this is, you know, it's still quite a substantial budget. If you've got £1,000 budget to spend, to be honest with you, and you're looking at Go Sankey, my advice is probably going to be look anywhere other than a Dainichi fish, because my guess is you're going to get a far better fish from a different breeder, male or female, for that kind of budget. You know, this farm is at the top of its game. You know, if we're talking comparing it to cars, it's the Ferrari or the McLaren of the koi world. Yeah, don't get me wrong, you can get cheaper examples out there, but for me, I've always been about getting the most fish for the money. So I think I mentioned it in some video somewhere that, you know, the cheaper fish at Dainichi, you know, when you're at the farm, you've got Hoshikin, literally a 5-minute walk around the corner. And Hoshikin is still an absolute top tier breeder. You know, if you put the very top tier, for me, you got Sakai, Momotaro, Dainichi. And then you've got a level below, which is the likes of Nogami, Marido, Mariyama, Hoshikin, all them kind of guys, still producing serious fish, but they don't carry the same price level that the likes of Dainichi or Sakai fish do. So yeah, as nice as it is to get your hands on them things, the chance of you getting, you know, something of real quality at that kind of price bracket from that farm is very little. So male or female out of the window. Yeah, don't just chase it based on the name. And yeah, again, male by male. This has really been the one for me for years now. Too many people are ignoring male fish, chasing this unrealistic female dream and buying inferior fish for the simple thing of they're getting a male fish out of it. Chris will probably relate to it more than me, because I don't deal with a lot of the hobbyists, obviously, or none anymore. So, but yeah, this is a relentless thing, and I do obviously get a lot of requests coming back, especially when I'm out in Japan. You know, they're looking for this from this farm, this breeder. Must be this sort of pattern, female. And yeah, guys, seriously, you know, fish, the prices of fish was actually just discussing before we came live, you know, the Dainichi auction that I've just been in. I was chasing a Ginrin Showa, which I was absolutely in love with. Superb fish. And just under 30 cm, and I lost out. I mean, I was into serious price on it when, you know, I walked away, and this fish carried on because it's from the right bloodline, from the right breeder. It's got the capability of winning a show in Japan, and if that fish, my guess is it's coming to market all said and done, probably around £8,000 to £10,000. We're talking less than 30 centimeters, and yeah, that's some perspective. You know, these kind of fish, these kind of transactions in Japan are being done daily. I'm unable to do it, but if I sat back and look at what the latest Dainichi auction just generated, I certainly saw the prices fish were going for, and we are talking fish under 30 centimeters that are thousands of pounds each in value. That is the reality of this farm. It's not just one or two fish selling at that level, it's every fish. And that's the reality of it. So unfortunately, if that's not the realm that we're in, it's then trying to look at what we can do with the budget we've got to get the most fish from it. So, and these were unsexed tosai, by the way. The male-female debate has not even been in question with that one. I've seen it at Dainichi when he's puts guaranteed female on there, and you just can't get near it. You really can't get near it. The prices are absolutely staggering. So yeah, it's not a case of, you know, walking around and yeah, when you chuck that, even so come back to Hoshikin around the corner, the price difference at Hoshikin, male to female, he places zero value on male fish. He's not at a point in his farm where his male fish can command that kind of value. Again, coming back to the big three, Dainichi, Sakai, Momotaro, the males are building to such a level now where they're commanding prices closer and closer to female every year. But yeah, at these other farms at Hoshikin, you can literally, like I've said it constantly, a third of the price you'll pick up an equivalent quality male to female at a third of the price of the female fish. And these fish are still the same size. Most of them still have the same body, bone structure elements. This is a bit that a lot miss. You know, the typical old school male body is what put a lot of people off with this stuff. The body comes down to the bone structure. This is what we discussed today. If the bone structure on the male fish is right, you'll still put the size on and you'll put the volume on. So it's nothing to be afraid of, and you'll get the skin condition. These liners can get the size. So I'm seeing very, very little drawbacks as to why you wouldn't want to buy them over the female when you can potentially get 3 times the fish that your budget would normally allow if you was chasing females. So yeah, a huge one for me. That great question, Jeff, to be honest. But yeah, buy male, guys. Honestly, you're just gonna drop the female thing and you know, take advantage of these discounts that are out there, because trust me, the way things are going, 10 years time, I think it'll be a different conversation where males are getting closer to the price of females. All it's going to take is a few big male fish to sort of cross over potentially into the female division at the All Japan show, win some major award and be competing on that same level as females, and it's game over from that pricing perspective, because then breeders have got the golden ticket to be charging equal money, because ultimately it's over there, it's the fact that it's mainly the female fish winning the top honours that drives the pricing. So like I say, the minute a male fish does cross the gap, and believe me, I don't think it's that far away, yeah, it's game over, and it'll just become, like I say, a level playing field, and none of the prices will go down. So yeah, that's me. It's not the last you'll hear on that one, because I really want to get that message across and sink it in. So let's just run with one more question, Steve, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. Yeah, right. So yeah, introducing smaller tosai into a pond with 50 centimeter plus in terms of food and size, etc. So let's talk absolutely ideal world. In the ideal world, you wouldn't do it, because there's not this, you can't. The two fish will mix perfectly well. It's the issue we're looking at here is if you're looking to maximize the growth of those tosai. I think I mentioned this before. Ultimately, in that mixed pond, there's going to be groups that miss out. So it could be that at feeding time, the tosai, you know, they tend to get there first, very rapid, fast swimming, get to the food quickly. Then when the bigger ones come in, they're going to frighten the tosai away. So both groups will get a bit, they'll get their bit, but ultimately, you know, they're not going to get the full feeds that they would get if they were isolated on their own and just had the freedom and weren't intimidated by the bigger fish. So introducing them is not a problem. The two groups mix perfectly well together. And the small fish, you know, in a pond with bigger fish will still grow. It's just going to hold back the potential growth that you can achieve because there will be dominant forces. You know, there can be dominant forces if you're growing fish of a similar size and you're growing chagoi and karashigoi with gosanki, for instance, because the majority of us know chagoi, karashigoi, you know, absolute pigs, never take their head away from the surface. And that's just what they do, and therefore, you know, Kwaku as their sort of up-down feeders go away for a little minute. The chags don't move. They're mopping up on that food that could be all gone by the time the Kwaku comes back for a second dose. And yeah, that's just unfortunately what it is. You know, if you've got, you know, the ability to have a second pond or a grow-on pond, that's the ideal thing for small fish, just to bring them on and bridge the gap before they go into the main pond. But if you haven't, it is what it is. You make the most of what you've got, and they will be fine. We'll just expect the growth to be a little bit slower than it typically would if they were on their own. But again, that's not to say that they're not going to grow, because they absolutely will. Right, that's me. I'm absolutely talked out, to be honest. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please, I would still ask everybody who's out there who would like to get involved to get in touch with us through one of the social channels and get booked in to come on Question Time Live. It's an absolute pleasure spending this time answering your questions, and we just need to keep the cycle coming. As ever, Steve will keep a record of all of the questions that have been asked in the comments, and bit by bit, whether it's through one of the lives or one of the pre-recorded videos we will do our best to get around them slowly, but please keep them coming in. Like I say, we do keep a record. They're not just forgotten, and we'll get there in the end. So once again, thank you for your time, and me and Steve will see you next week.